Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
InsideTheBirds.com is where you want to hit up for all of your Eagles, NFL, and draft coverage. And the man who is all over the draft leading up to draft day and beyond, Andrew DiCecco, joins us live from Penn State Pro Day, where there is an appearance, a sighting of a very specific member of the Eagles organization. We'll get into all that and more now with the man himself, Andrew DiCecco, at DiCecco NFL on Twitter, here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig filling in for Mike Gill. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. Good to speak with you. I'm enjoying the 65-degree and sunny weather here in State College. It was raining back home, so no complaints on my end.
It was downpouring back here. Get it right, okay? First of all, I got to get to the appearance, the Eagles' appearance out there. Jonathan Gannon was at the Pro Day. So what does that say to you, Andrew, as someone who covers the Eagles?
Well, to me, that screams Jaquan Brisker, the safety, to me. I mean, looking at what the Eagles currently have on their roster right now, they've almost, outside of a trade that would be unforeseen, they really have painted themselves into a corner in which they almost have to address the safety position in a big way in the draft. Obviously, re-signing Anthony Harris really doesn't move the needle at all, Josh. So what you're looking at here is, I think Brisker would be an ideal candidate at 51, or should the Eagles opt to trade down in the first round, you might see someone like Brisker, his stock start to rise, and he might be one of those guys that teams try to grab at the end of the first, and someone who really continues to rise throughout the pre-draft process. I thought he really helped himself today, ran a 4.4. You also have to look at Jesse Luketa, the linebacker, who worked with the defensive ends today. He has been in contact with Philadelphia, per him, when I asked him today, but he has not. He didn't get a chance to speak to Gannon. I like him as he's 257 pounds, so I think that he can either add, another 10 and be a defensive end, or I think he could really be an effective linebacker. I thought he really addressed a lot of questions that people had about his short area quickness. His short shuttle was 4.2 flat today. Very impressed with him. I thought he made some money and helped himself in a big way. And, Jahan Dotson to me was the star of the day, in my opinion. I thought he put on a clinic as far as ball tracking, and he made every catch look effortless, and he was a very smooth technical route runner. So I was really impressed with him. So, I mean, those are just a few of the guys that I thought, as soon as I saw Gannon, I thought, it makes a lot of sense, because those are all areas that the Eagles really need to shore up.
Before I ask you more about Dotson, I want to dig a little deeper on Brisker. Explain to the audience what kind of safety he is, because for the last few years, before Jonathan Gannon, in the Schwartz defense, the idea is when you had Malcolm Jenkins and when you had Rodney McLeod, you had a specific style of safety. But Gannon's defense is different than Schwartz's. And last year, he had Harris, he had McLeod, as you mentioned. They bring back Harris. So if they were to draft a guy like a Jaquan Brisker, how does he fit into Gannon's scheme? And what has he shown you at the college level that translates to the NFL?
It's a great question. So what I see that I really like is that he is versatile. He's scheme versatile, and I thought that in many ways Jonathan Gannon was hamstrung in what he was able to do with those two safeties. So I think when you add a player like Brisker, who can line up at corner, he can line up at safety, he can play in the box, he can play on the back, he can play deep coverage. Very fluid, rangy player that can really do it all. And I kind of envision him being sort of like a Malcolm Jenkins, versatile chess piece at the next level. There's not many things that he can't do. And when you look at what the Eagles really need, and he would give Jonathan Gannon so much more flexibility on the back end in terms of what he's able to do with disguising coverages and things of that nature. And when you're looking at 51, I think that he would be the ideal target at that spot.
You mentioned about the versatility within schemes. I think that's one of the things people forget about Gannon, and that is doesn't have a stagnant defense. It's not something that's just, this is a 4-3 or this is a 3-4. He wants to play variations and different things. So, for example, you mentioned Brisker. He's at Penn State. They signed Hassan Reddick. How do those kind of players become more ideal than some of the guys the Eagles had last year?
Well, just giving him, optionality and different variations and disguises in which he can throw at teams. And you got a guy like Hassan Reddick. He's a souped-up version of what they actually envisioned they were getting in Jannard Avery. So they're going to be using him in a multitude of ways, Josh, but I think that you're going to see them deploy him quite similar to how you saw Jannard Avery, how he was used last season, except he'll be, he'll be much more effective in that role. And then Brisker, I mean, you look at what the Eagles had to work with at safety last year. I was really shocked that Harris was the safety that was retained instead of McLeod, because I thought for sure that Rodney gives him a little bit more variety and flexibility in which he's able to kind of run his defense on the back end. And given his history with the team, kind of surprising. But both Harris and McLeod really are limited in terms of their athleticism and their range and just their overall game, their attributes and their intangibles and their traits. They're 30 years old, and they just don't move the needle quite enough, and they're just not good enough players. And I think when you look at someone like Brisker and all that he's able to do, it's very enticing, especially, if you're Jonathan Gannon, who was really had his hands tied behind his back in many regards. I think a lot of folks forget that because it's easy to point the finger at one guy. But, I mean, he was really limited, Josh, in what he was able to do defensively. And both of those players really give him, an opportunity to really turn things loose.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew DiCecco, check out all of his work over at InsideTheBirds.com. He was at Penn State's Pro Day today talking about some of the players on display. One of them you mentioned a little bit earlier, Jahan Dotson. He's an interesting player because he's a guy who seems to catch everything that's thrown at him. He didn't play with some great quarterbacks at Penn State, but he was able to still be a very productive player. What are your observations of him, and would he make sense for the Eagles if they could snag him maybe some point in the draft?
Well, he was listed at slightly over 5'10", so he doesn't really fit the bill as far as the big body boundary X receiver that the Eagles really need. However, he's a playmaker, and you want to get as many good players on your football team as possible. He's a winner. He instantly invigorates that wide receiver room and complements what they already have in a big way. And he's someone who just attacks football, runs smart routes, knows how to find the openings in zone, can affect all three levels of the field. He's just an advanced player. And you said he caught everything, and today it was no exception. He caught everything thrown to him, tracked the ball. I was just very impressed with how he handled himself on in a big moment like this. And it really just, proves that he's NFL ready. And the way that he conveyed himself, it wasn't an arrogant confidence, but it was a confidence. He truly believes that he's the best receiver in this draft. Whether or not he is or not, I mean, that's always up for debate. But I really like his skill set and what he's able to do, and I think he's an instant contributor to whatever team he goes to. Very mature kid and a very refined skill set.
You mentioned the kind of receiver the Eagles need. Well, obviously this week they signed Zach Pascal, who was introduced by the Eagles today. Seems like a nice guy, seems like a good guy, but when I talked to Jason Avant the other day, Andrew, he described him as situational and that he's not really the guy that the Eagles need. So if the Eagles still need a big body receiver, how do you envision a guy like Pascal fitting in?
I was really caught off guard with the amount of discourse surrounding that Zach Pascal signing. We're talking about a guy who's going to be a third or fourth wide receiver on the depth chart. He makes the room better. It's not. They still need to make a big move there. It's not good enough yet, but I mean he does help the room. You're getting a veteran there. You're getting somebody who toiled in relative anonymity in the early part of his career, and that's an undrafted free agent. Didn't make two teams, was coming from Old Dominion, which is not exactly a football factory. There's a lot to learn from them in terms of route running. You saw that with Travis Fulgham, for example. And I thought that he really proved that he works hard. He's diligent in his blocking. He does the dirty work. He's been, oddly enough, he's been a pretty strong red zone presence for the Colts. So I think that he's going to be a factor there. I think he's going to set a good example for the young receivers that the Eagles currently have. And he's going to be outstanding on special teams. He's a great gunner, and he can also contribute as a returner. Now, I'm not going to sort of spin this signing like they signed some all-pro, Pro Bowl wide receiver that has all-pro, upside. but he does help the room, and I thought it was a good sign. There's familiarity with Nick Sirianni, and Sirianni got him to flourish. I mean, 44 catches, I believe he had one season with Sirianni. That is flourishing, considering where he came from and what he had to do to get to that point. So I'll be interested to see what he does and how he factors into the rotation. I envision him as the third receiver, but still, they need a big body receiver to go with what they already have. And I think that either by trade or you go through the draft to find that player. But the room certainly needs another piece. They're not quite there yet, and I don't think there will be anybody out there that'll tell you that they're 100% all the way there.
Well, let me ask you about some of the guys who could be grabbed. We mentioned the draft. I see mock drafts that talk about Treylon Burks from Arkansas. I've heard people talk about George Pickens from Georgia would be a great addition for the Eagles. Do either one of those guys interest you? Do you think either one of those guys makes sense for the Eagles?
Burks in particular, Pickens is going to be going in a sort of an odd spot in which I think that would sort of wipe out the Brisker pick. I think he could go late 1 or early 2. And I think that he's kind of going to go in a spot where the Eagles might have to trade down to get him or trade up in the second or something to that effect. But I think Burks could be, it would make a lot of sense, Josh. It would be a first-round option, and I wouldn't rule it out, knowing that the Eagles are going to swing the bat and try to go after these wide receivers. You saw them do it. Obviously, they tried with Rager. They succeeded with Devontae Smith. They reached high, and they reached, being the optimal term, for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the draft. So they're certainly not they're not afraid or hesitant or timid to do that. So I think that Burks would make a lot of sense there, possibly at 19, I would say, but and how does he factor in? He gives the Eagles an aggressive outside receiver that's going to fight for the football and come down with those contested catches in the red zone. I think between him and like a Dallas Goedert, I think that you might see a lot more red zone productivity with a player, of that mold, and that's what they really need.
On Tuesday, Jason Avant said almost the same exact thing as Greg Cosell in the Intel on the Inside the Birds podcast. They both said that Burks reminds them in what he's able to do to Deebo Samuel. What is your reaction to that?
Yes. As soon as I heard that, I was like, absolutely. It's Deebo. We're not saying, and I'm not saying that he's certainly a Deebo Samuel clone, but he does have those similar traits. And envisioning how he could fit into that offense and the different, the different stresses he can put on, opposing defenses is really enticing to think about. You have to think, for Shane Steichen, Nick Sirianni, and the coach and Aaron Moorhead. So, just getting him in space and letting him take advantage of his athleticism, and he's going to be an explosive guy that can move all around formations, and he also has the size that they really need. So it screams Deebo Samuel, and I think that. I think that he would make the most sense out of all, out of the receivers that are in the first round conversation.
Now, in free agency, obviously the market is starting to slow down a little bit thanks to all these crazy trades. It feels like every day there's a new story. It looks like Kansas City is going to probably grab a guy or two. The report came out from Schefter a little bit ago that Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
Valdes-Scantling,
going to Kansas City. There's speculation about some of the other guys, but there are some names out there, some veteran guys. Obviously, one of them is Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, T.Y. Hilton used to be in Indianapolis. Do any of the veteran free agents out there you look at and say, I would take a shot on that guy, or do you feel like the Eagles need to wait till after the draft to maybe see who maybe gets cut after that?
If anything, you might look at a guy like a Devontae Parker who has some size to him, but he's more of a volume receiver. And how do you disperse how do you sort of disperse the targets, right? They already have a guy in Dallas Goedert to need to feed the ball to, and they didn't even do so enough last season in certain points. And you have a guy like Devontae Smith who really deserves, the lion's share of the targets. So, I think that you might be able to get him for a relatively, might be able to get him for a song, really, considering what they already have there. But he doesn't stay healthy. And look at guys like T.Y. Hilton. And Jarvis Landry. These are smaller receivers that they already have, very similar type of players. Well, not similar type of players, and Jarvis Landry is more of that physical move the chains type of receiver, runs very angry after the catch, sure-handed, good leader. And T.Y. is more the explosive threat, but he has, a history of a lot of soft tissue injuries and things like that. But T.Y. Hilton's an outstanding leader, and he would definitely help the room. But I mean, again, they need a big body because that still wouldn't solve the glaring issue and deficiency that really lies at that wide receiver room. So I don't know that would make a ton of sense if they go that route.
By the way, a little Eagles breaking news and a mild surprise. The Eagles are re-signing Derek Barnett to a 2-year deal, according to Schefter and Jeff Mosher. So I guess Derek Barnett's market didn't go too well, Andrew.
Right. Well, I kind of figured that he would be back because he was hanging around on the market for a while, and there wasn't a whole lot of suitors. The Eagles still need two defensive ends, really. So it made sense. Barnett's still pretty young. There's a lot of familiarity there, and I mean he doesn't offer a ton of upside. He'll never be a double-digit sack guy, but when you look at what the Eagles currently have at defensive end, they needed bodies in a big way, and now you go into the draft with not suddenly having a cupboard that's completely barren, outside of Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham.
Yeah, and Derek Barnett, I think if he doesn't play as many snaps as he did last year, has some value. Though I think the problem to me, Andrew, was Barnett had to play so much because of the Graham injury and because of other guys being unavailable, that him being on the field so much was really what hurt the Eagles, not specifically him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, Derek Barnett's somebody that's had some untimely penalties and discipline issues, but I mean, I think he can be productive and help them. Now, do I think he's a starting player? No, I think he's probably going to, slide in as a third end, but now it gives the Eagles an opportunity where their hands aren't necessarily tied in that they have to draft, multiple pass rushers in this draft. I think now you can take a stud edge rusher in the first round. And then if the opportunity presents itself and you see some good value on day 2 or 3, you can strike and get another one there. But now you're not necessarily pressured to add 2 guys just for the sake of doing so.
The Eagles have 3 first-round picks, Andrew. How would you like if Howie Roseman called you right now and said, how should I prioritize what I do with those 3 picks? What do you think the Eagles how should they prioritize?
Well, I think with 15, if it's me, I'm taking probably Devontae Wyatt. If Jordan Davis isn't there, you gotta shore up those trenches because, especially in today's NFL, the defensive tackle position, getting pushed from the interior and really affecting the quarterback and collapsing the pocket and moving him off his spot, even if they don't get home and get that sack, it's so invaluable to what defenses do, and it opens up a can of worms and it gets everybody else involved, especially on the back end, forcing throws and things of that nature. I would probably go D-tackle, then I would go edge rusher, and then I'd probably grab a corner.
You mentioned Davis. One guy I was talking about yesterday before I let you go, I would love if the Eagles landed Walker from Georgia. I think that guy, I feel like he fits what Gannon wants to do with those mixed formation and the variety of things that he wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was actually someone that I put, I believe, at 15 on my mock draft 2.0 for InsideTheBirds.com. And I really like his athleticism. 6'5", 270. And I've mentioned to Mike before, he has the ability to stay at 270 and play edge, or he can play up to 290 and give them some looks on the interior. And both him and Milton Williams would pair really nicely for, the foreseeable future, and 2 guys that offer positional versatility. And again, we talked about having that optionality, and Walker would give them that. And I think that his lateral agility and just some of the things he's able to do and his movements and his burst off the line at that size is really enticing. So I think that probably you might see a guy like Walker, or you could see one of those another Georgia lineman like Jordan Davis in the mix there as well.
He's Andrew DiCecco. Give him a follow on Twitter at @DiCecco NFL. Check out all of his coverage of the Eagles and the NFL draft over at InsideTheBirds.com. He was at Penn State Pro Day today, and he joined us on the phone here on Football at 4 on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, appreciate the time today and enjoy the draft process. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Sounds good, man. Have a good one.